Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We move on now to our next session this morning. Remember, if you just joined us, this is Naturally HR Week 2021, but more importantly, this is C-Level Day. Everything you've ever want, not everything you've ever wanted, but certainly lots and lots of great insight and conversation about the world of the C-level world together with the HR world, bringing those two together and really kind of making sense of how we can move forward together as well. And again, lots of thanks, sincere thanks to those our friends who support our community, the event moving forward. Already you've heard me say the names of so many supporters and friends of the event, and I'll continue with that now. Again, as a big thanks to Erste Bank, Knaz, Miloš, Telenor, Banca Intesa, Catena Media, Philip Morris International, posovnyinfostud.com, Strauss Coffee, Heineken, Sane, Six Centix, and many more as well. And I'll mention those. I will be proud to say those our friends, more of our friends, a little bit later on as well. So this now is the humanity opportunity. Quite a bold phrase for a title, isn't it? The humanity opportunity. But really, the next gentleman to share his perspective and his insights with you right now really firmly believes that human-centered thinking really represents the greatest organizational opportunity of our time. Again, bold statements, but through this next session, and I'm sure you'll understand when he starts to share those with you, you'll get it, and you'll see that actually he's right. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our virtual stage right now the founder of Experience Activists, Mr. Robert Pender. Robert, are you there?
I am indeed, Peter. Very good morning, Chair. How are you?
Good morning, Robert. How you doing? I know that for a fact you've been following us throughout the week. You've been coming in and out and really listening and taking in the insights. What's your perspective so far of HR Week?
Really insightful, and there's some tough acts to follow. So yeah, there's been some great talks, and yeah, still lots to cram into today too.
Well, the next act is you, the humanity opportunity. Remember, towards the end, I'll pop back in with questions from our listeners, and then take that conversation forward just before you finish. So, but in the meantime, Robert, over to you.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everyone, and a very happy Friday to you. As I said to Peter, yes, some really tough acts to follow there, but I also appreciate I'm talking to an exceptionally well-informed audience. But what I would like to do in the sort of limited time that's available is share some of my insights and through the experiences I've had, the things that I know that work, and some of the mistakes I've made and the things that I know don't work. But before I do that, I guess it's important to do just a little bit of a recap. And it's abundantly clear we live in really defining times right now. And Peter referenced the word bold, and that's exactly what we need right now within organisations. We need bold attitudes towards human resources, bold leadership, bold decision making, and businesses have really got to rise to the significant challenge that's been presented to them through, unfortunately, a devastating global experience. And in terms of this particular image here, I mean, there are millions of people that are concurrently hitting that button around the world, and it's something I've personally done myself when I found to be misaligned with organisations' values and certainly their behaviours too. And these really traumatic events of the last couple of years have given a lot of people time to reflect, not just about obviously what they want and need out of life, which I know is something that's been talked about a lot already this week. But we've been exposed to different ways of working, and also we've had a complete value reset too. People want to believe in what they're doing, and which is why every organisation has to stand for something. Even every organisation has an opportunity to have a really strong purpose and a really strong mission, irrespective of the sector or environment that you're working out of. And really today, fulfilment is required, and it goes well beyond just a simple paycheck. So if you have a set of values as an organisation and you're not living them and acting them out on a daily basis, my advice to organisations is always to scrap them. remove them, take them away from your intranet, and really go back to the drawing board, because every day you've got a set of values that's sitting around your organization that you're not playing out on a daily basis. You're doing serious sort of organizational damage to you. And in terms of the sort of power dynamic and the shift in change, businesses are finding themselves in really uncharted territories and in very rare situations. And that pendulum has really swung back in favor of people, certainly for the first time in my working life. And that relationship is now starting to even up, and very rightly so. And a lot of the challenges that organizations face is that they're now finding themselves falling under quite intense scrutiny from existing employees and also potential ones, and of course customers too. And so this is quite uncomfortable for organizations, but it isn't one that isn't easy to navigate. And really what that comes down to, whether organizations wish to or not, they're simply left with no option but to start listening and acting. And by listening to that pulse and heartbeat of the organization, you really get a feel for what's going on. And it's really important not to be swayed by outside influences. For example, in the UK, we've had a lot of politicians coming forward saying it's now time to get back to the office. We've all had a lovely time sitting around at home working remotely, which is simply not the case, of course. So what we need to do as organizations is really figure out what works for us, what works for our people. Everything else is just distraction and noise that we shouldn't really be influenced by. And obviously, everyone knows that people are fundamentally good within organizations, and it's really the system that I believe is broken. We are trapped in something that's, to generalize, no longer sort of fit for purpose. And I think this conventional thinking, the things we're brought up to do, the way we're taught to go about our work and think about work and the relationships we have at work, that's what's broken. And that's the sort of greatest enemy for an organization. And so what we need now, as I said earlier, is bold leadership. We don't need incremental changes or just a simple few tweaks here or there. We need to really start again and look at everything we're doing with a complete open mind, with a complete blank canvas. And there aren't really any rules or limitations in terms of what we can do and what we have to abide by, other than ensuring, of course, we act fairly and legally. And we have proved that we can change when change is thrust upon us, as has happened with the restrictions and the remote work, which is very uncommon for a lot of organizations. So it can be done, and we just simply have to maintain that perspective throughout as we move forward. So there's just a handful of things. There's a lot to cram in. I'd love to go into case studies and lots of data, but I just want to give you a flavor for a few high-level points. As I said about change, to keep that thirst for change in the foreground, it's my advice that we consider work as simply an ongoing experiment. The challenge is we, of course, become accustomed to a way of doing things. Habits are formed. It's difficult to break away from them. But if we sort of take a step back, remember there was a time that the office didn't exist, and people had to get used to that, and people can continue to adapt and are very adaptable. And what we really need is just agility across organizations, not just in the way we're working, but maintaining those agile mindsets. And the only real commitment organizations need to make right now is one to keep reviewing practices and ensure that when we are to change again in the future, which we will need to, it's a collaborative effort. The ways that we've settled upon working today, in 6 to 12 months' time, people may want to make adjustments to that. Ultimately, we're still finding our feet with this new approach to work. So there's a lot of change on the horizon, and I think if we maintain to people that this is a work in progress and we're going to keep adapting, but the decisions made will be for the greater good, then everyone will be very much on board with that. And I think one of the challenges that I see quite a lot is that it's easy to take the path of least resistance. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Organizations are frequently guilty of making some very well-meaning, but also potentially flawed gestures. For example, we see a lot more organizations now entering into having mental health days, or imposing leave upon people, ensuring that it's been taken and making that a managerial KPI. Now, those are very well-meaning thoughts, but in isolation, they actually serve no purpose. And a lot of organizations seem to be just trying to follow a trend, or seem to be want to just try to do the right thing. And we gravitate far too easily to implement solutions with understanding really what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And when you typically talk to leaders and then you talk to employees, you'll find there's a complete disconnect in how effective a lot of those initiatives are, and the perception is very different. So, and that's kind of leads me on to a few things that I want to talk about next, is how work really, to each and every one of us, is very personal, and organizations have to find a way to start catering to that. I've spent a lot of time working in customer experience, and organizations invest a huge amount of money into personalizing those experiences for customers, and we must now try to replicate that thinking for employees, and that obviously takes a lot of effort. And as has been discussed already this week, we have a lot more generations of people working in the office, and we have to explore the ways to tailor experiences for people. We have people at the start of their career journey, and we have people right at the end, and those needs are so different and so unique. And another very well-meaning gesture that's now starting to be rolled out on a wider scale is the 4-day working week, which again at face value sounds great. All the pilot schemes that have been run across the world show fantastic results, but there's also a train of thought that we're potentially just moving 5 days worth of constraints into 4 days. And by setting some fixed boundaries and dictating those working boundaries, that may not suit everyone. For example, I could be someone who wants to work 7 days a week, 5 hours a day. So we have to really think some of these ideas through and how we're going to implement them, because they look good, they sound good, but they're not going to suit us all. And we have to get down to that very deep level of personalization for people, in the same way we're committed to as organizations to do for paying customers. And that sort of segues into the old outdated notion of work-life balance, which is something that employees have talked about since the dawn of time. It's always been one of the top priorities in terms of their needs and their wants. And at the end of the day, of course, we're simply just human beings. We take our work home with us. It affects our sleep, our relationships, our mood, and inevitably we can't also help be affected by what goes in our personal lives at work. There isn't a switch that we can just flick based on our surroundings, which will change the way we act. As professional as we might be, we're human beings, as I said. So the notion of trying to separate out work and life and having this balance from an organizational perspective, I say, is almost shirking responsibilities. Great organizations are making a real effort to try and improve people's lives, and anyone can do this, which obviously then leads me onto a subject that I spend a lot of my personal and professional time immersed in, which is well-being. And if you care about people's well-being, you don't really get to cherry pick which aspects of that you're responsible for. People's well-being has been obviously severely challenged recently.
Robert, I'm just going to jump in. Everything's fine. It's just that I think there's somewhere along the line. I don't think it's you. I can hear just someone clicking on their keyboard. Perhaps I don't think it's you. It's not you, is it?
No, absolutely not.
It's not you. There's someone else online. There we are. Whoever that was, in the virtual world. Try not to do that. I don't know where it's coming from. We'll see. Hopefully, it won't happen again.
No problem, Peter.
That's cool. Okay, sorry. Take it away.
That's quite all right. So what I was saying in terms of well-being, many organizations really struggle to to prove the return on investment from well-being, and it's why a lot of those initiatives fail. So, but the issue with something like well-being is organizations think, well, I'm going to spend money on something, therefore there has to be something in it for me. I have to get something back. But the simplest way to address this is to not get into that sort of mindset of thinking that, well, there has to be something in it for us. Well-being should be something that is basically a fixed organizational cost that is just a staple part of your core expenses. And that's the simplest way to look at it. That's the human way to look at it. Now, there are a huge number of upsides in terms of well-being from an organizational perspective, but primarily what you need to understand is, are my well-being initiatives working? Are they improving someone's lives and their well-being? Once you can at least get that underway, that's a fantastic starting point. But we talk about some very personal subjects, of course, and people are in fear of speaking out about their well-being. But in other areas, of course, they're becoming increasingly more vocal, which sort of segues then into employee activism. And organisations are frequently now citing concerns over this continued rise of something that's been labelled as employee activism. And for me, you know, trying to silence people is really ill-advised, and of course becoming harder than ever. And it also infers to me you might be hiding the truth behind a polished corporate image. So I don't personally view employee activists as troublemakers. You know, as long as they're constructive and not disruptive, we should be embracing what people have to say. And there's some tough love to be heard for organisations, and maybe some truths that they may not wish to hear. But people obviously are now becoming increasingly outspoken about wrongdoings, poor behaviour, discrimination. And what the organisations have to remember is their fundamental purpose is to serve people and to listen to people, and that includes employees. And one of the most simplest things you can ever do is ask people what they want and go out of your way to ensure that you're giving it to them. And finally, to conclude, you know, we are in a relationship with our employees, and it's been one that's been viewed as being too transactional for too long. And organisations feel they're in the ascendancy. They've assumed this position of power because they're the ones paying the wages. And I believe we have to reframe this thinking totally. And so what I say to organisations is that, you know, imagine that you're forever on a first date with your employees. Your sole objective is to create the best possible impression and be the best version of yourselves. And there are so many simple things we can do to ensure complacency doesn't set in within our relationships in terms of gratitude and appreciation and thoughtful acts. And if we show that humanity to our employees, we will be rewarded many, many times over. So everything I've briefly gone through there isn't an attempt to appeal to your better nature. Well, it is. That would be a lie, of course. Yeah. But it's built on years of experience, and there are proven commercial upsides to all of these focuses. So I just hope if there's one nugget somewhere within all of my ramblings that you can take away and have a think about, then I shall walk away from this talk a very happy man.
Well, listen, I think first of all, you're a happy man anyway. You don't need this talk to be happy naturally. And I'm sure lots of juicy nuggets taken away, because it really gets us to reflect and think more about the well-being side and listening to people more, and really the empathy. I mean, you've heard it already. This week has been a lot about that word empathy and listening and trusting. And the more we get to do that, whatever level we are in the company, in whatever department, whatever we're doing, certainly it's going to bring us forward. We've got a question that came through: the best practices of holistic wellness in the workplace. If I was to ask you that, what kind of comes to mind? Who do you feel are kind of doing it the right way at the moment?
Actually, I've come across a lot of organisations that are not household names, and I think the important that are doing things really well. And I think actually not having a budget forces creativity and forces innovation. And some of the best improvements that I've seen come from people that don't have deep pockets. So it's actually a blessing It feels like a curse sometimes, but not having a budget's a good thing. So I think start really small and to think about what you can do. As I said, we're just in a simple relationship with human beings, and it's very simple to start to implement some easy things. But if someone wants to come to me with that question directly, I can share an awful lot more, of course. But it's there's a great opportunity to be had at the moment, Peter, as you know.
Yeah, so it doesn't really, it's not really based on whether you've got the funds for it, because it's something, it's one of those things that this whole theme is, you know, it's not based on funds, it's not based on how much money you've got, it's not based on how big your company is, it's based on really listening. And these are the kind of things that are, you know, that are valuable currency, but don't cost a lot to do, right? I'm interested as well, intrigued, if we go back at the beginning of what happened in something came up in March 2020. Naturally, we all know about that. How was it for you? How did you handle everything? Just tell us how you kind of got through this journey.
I mean, I was living in the Balkans, and I came back.
Really?
Yeah, I came back. I was in Montenegro, and I came back to the UK because of the COVID. So yeah, I've been back in the UK now for a year and a half. But I'm fortunate insofar as the industries I've worked in, we've been working remotely for a very long period of time. So it wasn't too much of a change for me. Peter, I think I've lost you. So my work is done. If anyone can still hear me, you can. There you are.
Am I back? Am I back?
You're back.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't know what happened. I disappeared, and I don't know what you said, but I'm sure it was great. And I'm back now. But listen, we're going to finish off right now. And listen, it's been intriguing to hear from you, and I'm sure the listeners that have been listening to you during the session will feel the same. Please reach out to Robert, and if you're curious, you'd like to know more about what he's been sharing, I'm sure he'll be happy to link up with you. But in the meantime, Robert, thank you so much. And you know, naturally a valued member of our HR community, and we hopefully we'll hear from you again in the future. So thank you for your expertise and, of course, your time.
Pleasure, Peter. Thank you very much. Have a very good day, everyone. Cheers.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye.